This is the Men Refined podcast.
Welcome to the Men Refined podcast, where iron sharpens iron, and men are challenged to grow in godly character. I'm your host, Rafael Sifontes, and my friend Andy Carter will be joining the podcast for this special series as we dive into one of the most powerful books on spiritual formation ever written, The Spirit of the Disciplines by Dallas Willard. In a culture obsessed with quick fixes and shallow spirituality, Willard calls us back to the deep, time-tested practices that truly transforms a man's soul. Over the next several episodes, we'll unpack key disciplines like solitude, fasting, study, and service, not as legalistic burdens, but as tools for freedom, strength, and Christ-likeness. This is about becoming the kind of man who doesn't just talk about faith, but lives it, practices it, and is shaped by it. Whether you're in a car, at the gym, on your lunch break, or out for a walk, welcome to the brotherhood. Let's grow together as men refined by the disciplines of Jesus. To our listeners in Apple, Spotify, Google, or whatever you tune in from, welcome. If this podcast encourages you, please take a moment to leave a rating or review. It means a lot, and it helps other men discover this community of truth and transformation. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hey friends, welcome back. Chapter 4 starts from Psalm 8, verse 3 and 5. It goes like this. When I look at the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. What is a man that you are mindful of him, and the son of a man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings, and crowned him with glory and honor. This is how this chapter begins. And the name of the chapter is Little Less Than a God. Maybe we can dig into what does it really mean to be human. I think that's where Willard starts, Andy.
The psalmist just started it by going, hey, who are we? I mean, it's asking that poetic question, trying to ask some questions about us, and the fact that we're a little lower than God, he kind of throws in as an explanation of what's happening, and it's pretty cool. You know, it really is a theological statement in this question, and that's how he gets started. Who are we as humans? And he comes to that question of why are we here? I mean, that $1,000,000 question. Exactly.
Why are we here?
Why are we here? And so he. Willard's going to go in this and say, look, if we can understand better who we are, why we're here, that we are part of the image of God, that there's some purpose and meaning to it. And so we're going to unfold that, as Willard starts to unfold it through this chapter. He doesn't give a completely concrete answer, but he certainly does give us some direction. And certainly has got my head, got me scratching my head, going, okay, what about this? What about that? And I think it's some really good insights. I think it'll be a great time.
So there's a little bit of there's a lot of Genesis in this chapter, right? There's a lot of creation, theological creation, what we are created for, and what is our place in life. And I definitely wanna bring this and circle back into the culture that we are part of, the culture that we're in. Because even though that we're new creatures, new creations, as believers of our Lord Jesus Christ, we live in a sinful world. And there's a lot of messiness around our lives. And this messiness really touches our life. We live in the mess. We are people that are sinners, that we're going to make mistakes. We're in that journey, trying to get better each day. In Christianity, we call that sanctification, as an everyday impulse from us on a spiritual sense to get better with God, and to add disciplines into our lives, hence all this series that we're going through, adding disciplines into our lives that help us get better, that help us what it means to be a follower of Christ. So Willard writes, God has created us for responsibility, creativity, and influence in his own image. The Bible says that we are image bearers of God, the creator. We're the creation. Andy, do you think that we have forgotten how much God believes in us as he the creator and we the creation? Based on this, in a culture obsessed with self-doubt and victimhood, how does we reclaim a high view of humanity, and how can we restore purpose? It's a lot in there, but from that point of view, if we were created by God for responsibility, we know that he gives us dominion over every creature. He gives us dominion over the land, and he gives us influence, and he gives us our mind, our creativity, and it says that it was done in his own image. So we are image bearers of God. So there's a lot of spirituality that we have internal. I think that's what, when people talk about souls, that's what it means. It's something deeper that comes from the creator, which is really cool to see that that word is really not being used much nowadays, but it's only one place where souls are really used a lot. And that's in the airplane industry, on like people flying. When they don't talk about individuals, they don't talk about humans, they talk about souls. How many souls do we have on board? It's very standard across the board in the airline industry. They talk about souls, which is interesting to get into that. I don't know much about it, but I know that it's very standard. They talk about souls. And I think we need to wrestle with that, right? With that self-doubt, that victimhood. Like, we were not created for that. We have to restore the purpose.
Yeah. So let's go back to some of your earlier questions of we have a lot of Genesis. We were created with a purpose. We're unique among creation. I think a lot of times we kind of skip over Genesis. We go through it and we read, oh, God created. We look at this. We ask a lot of scientific questions that we're going, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And how could that? And I think we get lost in details that we're not supposed to get lost in. The fact is, God created us, and he created us in his image. And it was on the sixth day when we come around, and then we're given something very unique and special. And I think that's why Willard is saying, well, I'm going to focus more time here. So, we need to understand that we are unique among all of his creation, that we are asked to do some ruling with God, stewarding his creation and being his visible representatives. So I don't want to get into the whole study on this one, but there is some people have analyzed Genesis 1 where it's creating a temple. And in every temple, you put in your image. Yes. And so that's where we are. And I think when we start to understand some of the greater imagery going on, we start to understand and appreciate this a little bit more. And I think Willard's starting to touch upon this. So if we can't understand who we are and what we've been created to be, then how in the world are we going to understand the Christian life? That's what he's getting to. The disciplines are not just about becoming better Christians. They're about restoring the image of God in us. Mm-hmm. It has been defaced by sin. And I think that is why he's going back to that, is that, look, we are created in his image in a very unique way. And until we understand that, then we're not going to understand we have a higher calling. So I think that's kind of the way why he's saying, look, let's dive back into this, because we have certainly lost that vision. He actually says in this chapter, when the soul is made holy, the body becomes holy also. How do we... And that's that new creation. You even talked about it. We're a new creation. That new creation's going back to this creation. The new creation isn't necessarily new, it's restoring. Anyway, so yeah. So the soul is holy. The soul was made holy by the Creator. If that is the case, if that is the intention, that our soul is made holy, then the body becomes holy also. But things have been distorted through generations. Our body has become very unholy. How can we rekindle our holiness in our body so it can be a really good reflection of the Creator, because we are an image bearer of God? I think actually you're jumping ahead. Of course I am. I think you are jumping ahead. Of course I am. I think he wants us to wrestle right here. We're going to get into more of that in the future in here. But I think why he's having us rest here is that I like one of the things that he says. He says, we do, in fact, live in a world of ruins. And so we're trying to define and figure out who we are. And yet when we look around, we're in a life of ruins. This is not what we're supposed to be. This is not what's gone on. Relationships have disintegrated. Our body seems to dominate our soul more so if we're going to use the body, soul, mind aspect. He kind of points out the flow of divine life has been interrupted. And so he wants us to wrestle there right now to go, look, this is what's happened. We are fallen humans. We lived with a disordered internal life. They're no longer aligned with God. They're no longer walking in unison with him. Our ability to represent his image is broken. It's obscured. It's misdirected. And until we can start to have that realize that needs to be healed, we're not going to get to that answer that you just now posed. What is that we're going to have to do? Let's first understand this, where we stand. And that's why I think, again, kind of repeating some of the yoke is easy, there's life in him and salvation, and his salvation is life, and practical real theology. It comes back down to practicing what Jesus did. And that's going to get to it. But we're getting to it. You can't, otherwise, until we start to see that the body is united to God in a very unique way, it's not our legalistic duty to acquire that. It becomes our muscle memory. It becomes who we are, and we engage in it, trying to get ourselves restored back to wholeness.
What would be a good practice to that?
I'm going to wait until Dallas Willard tells us some things. Oh. I'm going to be quiet unless you want to go there. I'm just going to be kind of quiet right now because I know he's going to talk about some specific things.
Sure. But we're not there yet, right? We're not
exactly.
in that chapter.
We're not there. You're asking the next logical question, and I'm just saying, time out, slow down. I said, slow down. So everyone who's listening, go, that's a great question. We need to get the answer.
Yeah, give me the answer.
No, we're not. Just wait.
The answer that we may have may not be your answer. I think there's some practical ways that we could do certain things to get to a certain level, spiritually and physically, because our body will represent our spiritual state where we are, mind and soul. And a part of me, the practical part of me, as I go through chapter and chapter, it's like, so what is the practicality? What am I learning? What I need to do based on the chapter, based on what I read? What can I change? What can I implement? Even though I'm getting the theory, I like to go into the practical aspect.
I know you do, Rafael.
I like to experiment, so I want to know what's working and what's not working.
All right, let me go there. Let's go there a little bit. Let's figure out what we can do.
Sure.
There is a belief problem, and that's what he's trying to address. Okay? There's a belief problem. If we can understand, hey, look, this is just not my body and independent of whatever I want it to do and independent of God. It's been made, I'm an image bearer. The person I'm talking to, you, right now, is an image bearer. The other people, the person who cut me off driving yesterday is an image bearer. Okay? Fallen, as we all are, frustrating as at times it can be, it starts to change how we perceive other people. We don't want to call them dirty names. We don't want to call them, subhuman names because they're image bearers. It starts to change how we look around. So I think that's a starting. I mean, just to stick to this chapter without jumping ahead, without going into the discipline of solitude, the discipline of fasting and all those other things. I think it's like, okay, let me start changing what I believe. No, we were talking the other day about the IKE. Information, knowledge and experience. So the information, it's here. We are fundamentally different than I think we treat and look at ourselves on a day-to-day basis. Information. The knowledge, how do I really apply? If that's true, how does that start to work out in my life? How does that really impact? I mean, out in the experience, it's just like going, I can believe that God has a unique spot for me. He's already given me some roles, and we're going to get into those in just a couple minutes. And in that, I should find some value. We all wake up some days on the wrong side of the bed. just like, you're a little angry, you're a little frustrated, you're just not, things just aren't going well. What am I doing here today? All of that type of stuff. Maybe that's just a good time to get back on our knees and be reminded, okay, God, that's the reality of the fallen nature of where I stand. Help me to see you.
And that's a good segue, because we have the gospel and we know what the gospel is, but the culture alternates between self-worship and self-loathing, basically. So if we know where we come from, if we know whose we are, Willard challenges both extremes. He challenges the arrogance of secular humanism and the despair of sin-shame cycles. So do you think that we're missing a true identity by measuring ourselves within our culture through achievements and appearances or approvals? Because sometimes as Christians, we do that a lot. But how do you think that the gospel corrects both things?
Good question. Well, he's focusing on an aspect of the gospel, which is more than just, come know Jesus and have a new life. Well, the part of that new life, that new creation that's what we're trying to wrestle with this. Let's learn to have unbroken fellowship with God. If we can start to do that, and we start to get our cues from our interaction with Him, then aren't we going to be a little bit more stable? We're not going to be getting
change everything in our
off
lives,
of everybody else,
right?
It's no longer I have to keep up with the Joneses or the Smiths or whoever. No longer do I have to do this or that. I wrestled with that last year, a year before, and continue to, when I understood that part of the creation story is God saying, enough. This is enough.
It is finished.
It is finished. This is enough. And I started to look at it in my own life, and I'm in real estate, and everyone is, all you ever hear whenever you go to them is about get more. How do you get more? You got to do this, got to do that. And I'm like, this is enough.
Or less. I want to pay less.
I want enough.
I want less. Yeah.
I want enough. I don't need to go out and fight for that next position. I don't need to go out and do these different things. That's enough. I want to work with the people that it's a ministry, selling and buying homes. I don't sell anything. I'm helping them walk through what can be a very challenging time. So anyway, all that to be said, I think if we can get our cues to look more heavenward than vertically than horizontally, we're definitely going to be much healthier. So good point.
And I brought that into reference about how the gospel actually correct our self-worship, our individualistic nature, because the gospel will make this to look upside down. It's about putting others first, putting us last. It's about thinking about us a little bit less. It's more of, especially in relationships nowadays, in the culture that we're part of now, it's all about people don't think about giving the next person first the benefit of the doubt by going into either a relationship or a discussion or a change of views and interactions about a specific subjects, right? It's like, I think we lost the fact that we should first give the benefit of the doubt when we get into some discussions or life issues, etc. Because what that will do is acknowledging that other person actually matters, and we should be maybe a bouncing block, a bouncing sound, an ear, a shoulder. Sometimes it's just good to be in silence when you're around people. Just be a hearer instead of a talker.
I think I mentioned it the other day, and it's a theme you'll hear me repeat a lot of times. It's humility and curiosity. And what you just described, it's being humble enough to listen to the other person, and you may be going, you can't believe anything that they're saying. You just can't believe it, going, yeah, right. But it's worth listening. And I think that's part of what we need to see happen a little bit more. If you realize the other person is a person who was created to radiate God's glory. They may not be doing it well. We may not be doing it. We're not here to judge that.
I am not.
Well, you know what? We have our moments. And I think sometimes we like to cut ourselves down way too much. Nonetheless, the person we're talking, let's say, has no clue about who God is, doesn't desire anything about God. They still are made in His image. And that's where the gospel kind of frees us up. And it's like, look, I'm a new creation. I'm being restored so I can do this. So, yeah, I think that's wise. So humility, curiosity, find out what's going on.
How do we see other person, right? There's a part of this chapter, the subtitle is the human body as part of the imago Dei, which is the Greek part of an image of God, right? That's the true translation. So it says the human body itself then is part of the imago Dei, for it is the vehicle through which we can effectively acquire the limited self-sustained power we must have to be truly in the image and likeness of God. And then he goes and he says, in creating human beings in his likeness so that we could govern in his manner, God gave us a measure of independence power. Without such power, we absolutely could not resemble God in the close manner he intended, nor could we be God's co-workers. I think that's the key, right? Mm-hmm. God's co-workers. The locus or depository of this necessary power is the human body. So this explains in theological terms why we have a body at all. Mm-hmm. That body is our primary area of power, primary area of freedom, and therefore responsibility. Mm-hmm. So if that is our pillar, theologically speaking, mm-hmm. that will change the way we interact with everyone. Mm-hmm. Our spouses, mm-hmm. our friends,
those hurting,
our kids, those who don't share the same views that we have, those who we interact with on the streets, which are people that we have no idea who they are. Mm-hmm. How do we see the other person? We don't know
what's going on in their day.
How do we see the other person, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's funny. You start to find out these people who have hurt I like the saying, hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And you interact with some of these people, and you're like, how in the world did that person do that? You know what? There's something that happened. I'm not saying that we all become so super tenderhearted that everything else is going on. No, sure. We find out what's going on. We instead of passing judgment right away to condemn, we pass judgment to go find out how can I help serve and bring the gospel of hope to this person. How can I? Because Jesus met us where we were, in the pain, in the situation in which he's about to get to. I want to jump on one more thing that you said, and that was the coworker. Mm-hmm. You were reading from Willard.
Co-laborers, right?
Yeah, co-laborers in that. A little before that, because you're getting towards the very end, he builds something up that I think it's worth us discussing a little. And that is that we're giving an assignment. In fact, he says that in the work assigned to us at the creation, a clue to the unity and purpose of our many-sided nature was given. He goes down a little bit further. Another ability is to live in right relationship to God and to other human beings. So in other words, this is a multi-layered thing. We all know that we're given the opportunity to name the animals. Let's get to name them. Let's be involved. I'm sure there's a little bit more. Name usually means more than just a title. It means character. It means engagement. It means more than that. So
power. How about
power? Cooperation.
Yes.
There's
responsibility.
Yeah, we in our West, we just think name. That's the name. Boom, we're good.
Sure.
But generally in the East, it means a little bit more. When you say in the name of God, you're talking about not just the three-letter character that we're using in our, we're talking about his whole character of who he is. So anyway, so in the midst of this, we just didn't lose our place. We just lost our way. We completely are out. All the normal that we deal with, really what we see is a tragic deviation of what God has created. And he shows this, which I thought was really fascinating in the animal sacrifice. And he explains a little bit more of that. And I just didn't want to pass over that because I think it's too easy that we do that. And I'm going to try to read some of my notes, and I hope they can make enough sense. But animal sacrifice is introduced in the biblical story after the fall. Subtly at first, he clothes Adam and Eve with what? Animal skins. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here are these animals that they've been naming, that they've been getting along with, and they didn't need to wear their clothes.
Right.
They didn't need it. Then formally through Cain and Abel, so the animal situation comes up even more. And then later on in the Mosaic system, that he brings in the whole sacrifice. He doesn't dwell long on this, but it seems to have a logical biblical theology that he wants us to be aware of. So think about it. A visual, bloody sign that sin brings death. The use of the animals. Mm-hmm. They had to have clothes. Mm-hmm. A temporary substitute just to cover our guilt.
Yeah.
Again, the animals had to do it. It's a reminder that the separation of God and man is not trivial. It costs a life. So it's already pointing to Jesus.
Yeah.
Right there.
There's a sacrifice that needs to be made to cover our wrongdoings.
All that because we're created in the image of God and we blew it. Again, I just can't see how you can avoid the prophetic shadow of pointing to Christ. Hebrews describes as being that our sins will be taken away once and for all.
Yes.
And so I
Our
can't
pain
help
will
but
be
see
thrown
that
away
the
as far as the
sacrifice is a dramatization of the seriousness of how God views the fall, how it's alienated us, and how it needs to bring us back. And how he's helping to provide us for our salvation, to restore us into the original image bearers of God. But boy, chapter 3 in Genesis, beginning of a mess. And I think we have been too focused on just ourselves, and it's more about me, myself, and I. And yet the reality is this beautiful thing that we had in relating to God has been all messed up. And the rest of how we relate to the world. Animosity is created, limitation is created, all sorts of other things are created that we exacerbate. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring in a little bit more of that theological discussion that's hidden in there, some nuggets.
How do you think that nowadays technology and our modern culture has really flattened our sense of purpose as image bearers of God? What would you say when you hear that? Technology and our modern culture has flattened a sense or our sense of purpose as image bearers of God. I'll give you something.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll give you my thinking.
I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot to it.
I'll give you my thinking. You and I have grown kids, basically. Your kids are a little bit older than mine. My oldest is 25 almost, then 19, almost 20, and a 16-year-old. So we have raised our kids basically in kind of like two generations. When they were little, there was not that big push of giving your kid an iPad. Like, we didn't grow up giving our kids an iPad just to keep them quiet. I think all that stuff came about when they were a little bit older. And I say, after probably 10, 11, 12. More or less. Nowadays, you see little kids under 10-year-old, parents give them just an iPad just to keep them quiet, basically. And it starts at as early as 2, 3-year-old, okay? That's a big problem, but we're not talking about that. When I mean why technology and our modern culture has flattened our sense of purpose as image bearers of God, what I'm saying is how the individualistic sense of comparing ourselves, our lives, the way we do things with the beautiful thing that we see in social media and on the internet, how that has pushed us into a place of not even understanding whose we are anymore. Because the internet and social media nowadays is show your best and hide the rest. That's basically what it is, right? Mm-hmm. You want to show your best, you want to hide the rest. Mm-hmm. Now, you can find places on the internet where you get faced with people who are actually showing their worst. And they're either trying to show just that they can, or they're trying to be really raw because the place that they have been, and they're trying to say something and bring awareness into certain situations. But that's not the norm. Usually the norm is show your best, hide the rest. That has created a new generation of young adults, which at the end, they don't know whose they are. As we encounter mid-20s, young adults, well, I don't think a young 20 guy wouldn't be considered a young adult, right? Wouldn't think so. Is it? Is it a young adult? Young. A 24, 25-year-old would be a young adult?
Yeah, I'd call him a young adult.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Interesting.
Or you would have called him a young adult.
So, I mean, at 25.
I mean, they're an adult, but yes, they're
sure.
young adult.
So what I'm trying to say is technology and our culture has just diminished the whose we are, how kind of an image bearer we are, and what we are.
Well, so let's even back up. I think you're making a great point. It's an obstacle that helps us to see it. And again, it goes back to when I quoted Willard earlier about that. The fact is that we live in a world that's a ruin. And we don't realize it. All these things look nice and shiny and fancy and everything else, but they distract us. Mm-hmm. They send us on a different path. We don't interact. We don't have boredom. If you get boredom, there's something wrong that you're doing. You should be able to find some type of entertainment, something to get that dopamine level back up. You should be able to do something, and that's not good. I think that as we fill it with these fake things, I mean, these are great tools. Don't get me wrong.
Sure,
The internet, I mean, we're using it today. Here we are. We're talking through it all.
They can be good or they can be bad.
Things in here.
It's how you use them.
A lot of it is how you use them, but I do think that, unfortunately, it has a greater power for not so good than it does for good. It's just, hopefully we can try to take advantage of the good.
I think it goes back to our human nature, right? Because I think social media has not, it has just incremented and exposed our sinful nature even more. Our sinful nature has always been there, but social media has exposed it to a different level. It doesn't mean that it has increased it.
It just
has
exposed it. Yeah. Our insecurities, our need for approval.
Yes.
Our, I think, so here's a question for us all, is just to ask, how is social media, how is technology, how is this immediate feedback loop influencing my pursuit of God, my pursuit of my spouse, my pursuit of others? So in other words, use your questions and go, how is this really impacting me? Where do I find joy? Where do I find challenge? Where do I find sorrow? And do I really find too much joy in some of this? Is too much being met here? So if we live in ruins because the tragedy happened in Genesis 3, and we need to realize that as much as we make this place a wonderful place to live, and I'm not saying we can't enjoy life, but the reality is we're living in ruins, how do we help to be part of restoring those ruins, healing them? Is this helping me to become a better understander of being an image bearer, or is it not?
How will you close this portion of the chapter? Well, this chapter.
Yeah.
And what will be a good resource to put out there, or a good statement to close a chapter like this? The chapter again is called Little Less Than a God.
Willard ends it with a little bit of understanding of the power
that we have as humans, right?
Yeah, that we
was
can tap
granted
into
to
the
us, right?
resources of God's power.
Sure.
And I think you pointed out is that we tap into the resources of modern technology more so than we'll tap into the resources of God's power.
So we're forgetting whose we are.
We can very easily forget who we belong to. And so he says, to understand how such power is possible for us within the limitations of our finite bodily being, we must look more deeply into the nature of life, and especially at its surprising abilities to transcend itself. To pursue its course by means of a substance that lies beyond it, we are a little less than a God only because our life is of such a nature that it can draw upon the infinite resources of God. So you taking us down the path of modern technology and all the other things that draw us, what an obstacle we face to be able to fight, for us to learn to draw upon the infinite resources of God.
Yeah, that's a good segue, because I think Willard emphasizes the responsibility and also the participation that we have as image bearers of God in our day-to-day life, and not passivity. Mm-hmm. And I will say now, it will be a good question to ponder. It will be, what would shift in our family career or in our faith maybe, as we start taking ownership of our God-giving influence, on our God-given power and nature as image bearers of God? That will be a good question to ponder.
There you go. People, you have something to think about. We'll see you next week.
See you next time. Thanks for joining me today on the Men Refined podcast. I hope this conversation encouraged you, challenged you, and helped you take one step closer to becoming the man God created you to be. If you find value in today's episode, will you take a moment and leave a rating and a review? It will help more people and more men find this podcast. It will help the algorithm, whatever it's called now these days, and join us in this journey of spiritual growth and godly leadership. You can follow and share the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to your podcast. And be sure to connect with me on social media, especially on Twitter at twitter.com/Rafael Sifontes. Links on the bio, on the description of this podcast, or X, right? .com/Rafael Sifontes. Until next time, stay grounded in the word, bold in your faith, and refined in Christ. Blessings.